Some of the issues you just mentioned, that the lack of health care and inequality and unfairness is due to Washington gridlock we have today, and your book, I think, points out that the founding fathers, especially the southern ones, especially in Virginia, pushed to create a government with excessive checks and balances, yes, while other world democracies were created for more, that are more action-oriented.
Yes. So the first thing we should be clear on is we were not founded as a democracy. We were founded as a slaveholding republic, and we just have to be honest about that. If a democracy means a government of the people, by the people, then the fact that when we were founded, the only people who could exercise the franchise were landed white men. So most white people couldn't vote, women couldn't vote, black people were enslaved, and indigenous people were not even considered part of the nation. So it is a very successful propaganda that we even think that we were founded to be a democracy. We were founded to be what they considered a representative republic, but we were a slaveholding republic. So as I argue in the opening essay of my book, is we're all taught to think about the kind of heart of American identity as the abolitionist North, right? That the revolution, the heart of the revolution was Boston and Philadelphia. That's not true. The heart of the revolution was Virginia. Our country was largely shaped not by liberty-loving people in the North, and by the way, all 13 colonies at the Revolution engaged in slavery. There were no free colonies during the Revolutionary period. But the heart of America was the slaveholding South. So the drafter of the Declaration of Independence, an enslaver from Virginia. The father of the Constitution, enslaver from Virginia. Bill of Rights, enslaver from Virginia. Patrick Henry, give me liberty or give me death, enslaver from Virginia. First president, enslaver from Virginia. 10 of our first 12 presidents, enslavers, most of them from Virginia. Majority of our Supreme Court, enslavers. Majority of the Senate, enslavers. How do you have all of the most powerful people who are shaping the political, social, cultural institutions of a nation are enslavers, but somehow slavery has little to do with the country that was born? Virginia was the oldest colony, it was the biggest colony, it was the most wealthy colony, it had the most political power, and 40% of the population of Virginia was enslaved. It was, as historian David Blight called, the American South was one of just 5 slave societies in the history of the world. 5. Ancient Greece, ancient Rome, the Caribbean, South America, and the American South. So that we even think about kind of the heart of American identity as being Boston or Philadelphia, yes, the Declaration was written in Philadelphia by a Virginian who enslaved people, who brought his property with him to keep him comfortable while he enslaved. So we have these tensions from the beginning of our country between how much of our country would be free labor, and how much of our country would be enslaved labor. But because of things like the 3/5 compromise, which we all learn about, but not really, what the 3/5 compromise said is that all of the slave states can count all of the enslaved people as 3/5 of a person for representation in Congress, which meant they got more seats in Congress than what their voting population would allow, which meant they got to architect a weak federal government because they were afraid that the federal government, if it was run by Northerners, would abolish or limit slavery. Right. So we are one of the few democracies, they call them veto points. Most democracies have 1 veto point. We have 3, right? Actually we have 4, including the Supreme Court. So in most countries, you have your legislature and you have your executive, and that's your 1 veto point. But one of our houses of Congress can veto the other house of Congress, and the president can veto both of those houses of Congress, and the Supreme Court, which are unelected justices, 9 people, as we all know, they just took away a fundamental constitutional right for women, they can overdo all of that. And so what it's saying is that this legacy of slavery, this foundation, this need to set up a system of government that would not allow the federal government to have much control or power, that would allow different branches of government to stop any legislation moving forward, was about stopping any legislation that was going to restrict slavery from moving forward. And so we all deal with that now. That's why we have a Congress, we have an executive branch, where even when you have all three branches under one political party, cannot pass legislation. That is a dysfunctional system, and it is another way that we are exceptional, but not in the ways we want to think.